welcome to the next project for the channel, and that is 12 scale pan car carpet racing. I don't know what happened, man. I got an ADD moment a couple of days ago, or like last week sometime, and thought 12 scale pan car, that's what I'm gonna get. Yeah, so there's no one currently racing 12 scale pan car on Friday nights. However, I found out that several of the guys going out on Friday nights, none of the newbies, some of the veterans, already have 12 scale pan cars. All of them, except for Williams, is the CRC carpet knife 25AR, big class in the St. John Club. So some of the guys that I race with got them with the intention of racing them at the St. John Club. Right? And shout out to them for helping me buy the right stuff and making sure that I don't waste money buying something that is inappropriate or incorrect for setting up this carpet car. The cost of the kit is inexpensive. There was concern about the cost of 12 scale electronics, but I mean, again, let's be real. If you race 8 scale, you don't care about the cost of 12 scale electronics. You don't. If you race 10 scale, you don't care about the cost of the 12 scale kit. Considering this was like $3.25 Canadian, my SC 6.4 was, let's just call it $500 to be fair. So, you know, it is what it is. I mean, the battery I overpaid. Well, I don't know. I mean, well, yeah, I overpaid $140 for a 1S battery. Come on. I pay more for my 2S batteries, but I use my 2S batteries across multiple classes. That's specific to 12 scale. So that one hurt a little bit. Servo. Yep, there are expensive 12 scale servos. Again, like, I'm taking it out of the house once a month, and I can't justify going big on some of this stuff, especially when I have so much other RC going on. I paid $80 for the 12 scale servo. Whoop-de-doo. My 10 scale servos are often in the $130 range. Not always, but often. And then let's talk $250 for an 8th scale servo, right? So whatever, $80 for a 12 scale servo. That's only good for 12 scale. $80, who cares? I take my. All right, ESC, $130 again. Okay, so in my 10 scale program, that's where I skimp. I buy the 10BL from Hobbywing, 120 amp, and they're on Amazon every day, all day for between $75 and $80. All right. So the 1S speed control is $130. But again, I race 8 scale. I've got a truggy, an e-buggy, and a backup. The Hobbywing XR8 Pro. They're $250 or more every day. So, you know, again, yeah, these things for 12 scale are specific to 12 scale, but when you compare them to other things, they're not that expensive. So, first impressions, the manual is done in-house on a printer by the looks of things, like a color laser jet, and I don't care that it's, you know, stapled in one corner. It's really, is it clear? Is it concise? Are the drawings accurate? And so far, yeah, it seems very easy to follow. So, however, CRC, update your website. You don't have the AR version on your website yet. You don't have the AR blank setup sheet on your website yet. And the cars didn't come out yesterday. So let's get on that, okay, kids? This shouldn't take long to build at all. I mean, normally I can hammer out an associated kit in 3 to 4 hours, a 10 scale. Pan cars are pretty basic, so I don't imagine it will take too long whatsoever. We'll go through what the manual was really like once I actually got into building it, because I mean, I'm simple, man. Like, I need like crayons and drawings to make me understand stuff. So if the manual is not very straightforward and clear, you'll hear about it. Quality of parts, fit, finish, stuff like that. We'll talk about it when it's all done. Finally, one thing, like, they're fast, so they're not easy to drive. And even though there doesn't seem to be a lot about the setup, well, I did buy the $225 Huddy 12 scale setup station last night, because everything matters. Now, if you think setup is critical for a 10 scale, yeah, This thing takes a hit. You got to loosen screws in the bottom and check the chassis to see if it's tweaked and retighten things after you put a straight edge on it. Like, it's so critical in 12 scale. Everything is very finicky and has to be done correctly and set up correctly. Chassis tweak. They're not complicated to set up, but like the little things really do matter. And I'm looking forward to learning tank car setup again, and because I love to pay attention to detail, and this little sucker is going to be all kinds of detail that needs to be focused on and attention paid. So I'm going to build it, and then there's lots of videos online about how to, you know, double check things and make sure that things are moving freely and all that stuff. Little things that you might overlook, kind of like breaking in the kit before it even hits the track. So making sure there's no binding, everything's smooth and free. I can't wait to get into that. So we'll see you back here when the kit is finished. All right, so already I've run into something that I find mildly annoying. And again, listen, it's a me problem. I get it. You don't need to tell me in the comments it's a me problem to get over it. I know it's a me problem. However, we're not through bag 1 yet. And it's asking me to proceed to a step that requires parts that are not in bag 1. Okay? So pod bridge pivot. And you are to attach the pod center pivot to the bottom plate. Chassis bridge, bag 1. Pod bridge pivot, bag 1. However, part 3367, the bottom plate, is nowhere to be found in bag 1. And that is because it's in bag 2. It's just little things like that that annoy me. It's a very simple kit. There's not a lot of bags. There's 12 bags, numbered 1 to 11, and then for some reason, bag F instead of bag 12, whatever. Yeah, the hardware for attaching the pod center pivot to the bottom plate is all in bag 1, but the bottom plate is actually found in bag 2. So, big deal? Nope. But these are the little things about manuals that do get under my skin. All right, we're moving right along. I have the side links installed on the little ball studs, and I have the rear pod mostly assembled and installed. And this is where you have an opportunity to make sure that your car is moving freely. So, while holding the chassis flat on the table, I lift the rear pod, and when I let it go, it falls. Now, I started off by having everything in the back finger tight, loose, right? And then slowly started to tighten things until there was binding and the rear pod wouldn't fall freely. And then I let off. More importantly, the part of the car that seemed to affect this the most is, I want to use the correct terminology here. It is the steel ball that's attached to the pod center pivot. Well, that goes inside the chassis center pivot. So there is a steel ball here attached to the pod pivot, and it goes inside this chassis. I missed it again. Hold on. Chassis center pivot. So there's a small screw here that tightens around that steel ball, and the idea is to tighten it just enough to eliminate any play, but not so much that it binds. See, now it's not falling as well. And I know with just the chassis center pivot here that is tightened just enough, because before I tightened my side links, it was falling freely. So you do things one at a time, creating some binding and then backing off, right? So with my side links loose, the pod was falling free. The pod's no longer falling free. So that means that one or both of my side links is too tight. So I'm going to back those off just a little bit. No, I'll back off the other one. There we go. See? So those side links were too tight. I was doing this earlier and slowly tightening the chassis center pivot on that steel ball until it locked up, and then I backed it off a little bit. See, so that kind of looks like this. There you go. Just the tiniest little tweak to that steel center ball on the chassis center pivot, and it's binding. So I'm just going to back it off just a hair. There we go. I mean, you're talking, I turned that screw a 1/16. A little bit of binding again. Yeah. Again, just another, I'm telling you, like minuscule micro adjustments to these things. All right, so it's falling free. We know the center pivot is good. I'll start to tighten up this side link. Okay, still falling free. I'll go to the other side link. Still falling free. Keep tightening until it's not. Or until it's bottomed out. I mean, you don't want to go with too many ugga-duggas. You don't need to go Mongo tight. There. So those button head screws are just about bottomed out in those side links. There. If you want these little cars to handle correctly, everything must absolutely be free from binding. The last one I tightened was this one. I don't like how it's moving, so I'm going to loosen it just a little bit. All right. And then, of course, you're going to drive the car and it's going to break in a little bit. You go back and tighten things up after a couple of runs, check certain things. Definitely recommended to put a little bit of removable, like a small fastener grade Loctite, like a blue, a 242 or a 222. I'm not sure which of those numbers is for small fasteners and removable. But make sure it's blue, make sure it's removable, and don't go silly on it just a little bit, right? Because you're not bottoming out that screw in the chassis center pivot. If you were, then it would bind the ball. So you're just snugging it up enough to take out the play, but maybe not quite tight enough to keep it in there. So a drop of blue Loctite, highly recommended there. On to the next step. All right, we're done bag 4. And before going on to, no, we're not done bag 4. We're about halfway done bag 4. And before going on to the next part of bag 4, definitely need to bring a couple of things to your attention to pay attention to if you're building this car or considering building this car. And that is the assembly, the tweak spring assembly, and the graphite cross plate. Okay, so this is the graphite cross plate, and the tweak spring assembly consists of a 440 by 3/8 set screw, molded plastic spring holder, and of course the springs. Okay, and let's see if we can get a good angle here so I can see these. Here we go. So your tweak spring assembly is right here. And what I want to point out is the step in the instructions that involves getting the tweak spring assembly, this set screw here, brought in to the top plate. Now, the manual says thread the spring holder, which is the plastic part. Can we see this here? There we go. This plastic part right here is the spring holder. Okay. Thread the spring holder flush with the bottom of the set screw. Pop the spring onto the holder. All right. So we have a stainless steel colored set screw that screws into the spring holder. Now, it wants to go on sideways and cross-threaded and stuff because it's a pretty soft piece of plastic. So you got to make sure that you hold it straight. So I was holding it straight with an old school box wrench, but it's a metric box wrench. It's 5 mil, 5.5 mil, and whatever's on the end there. 7 probably. So you get those assembled. Screw the set screw. Here we go. There's a great view. Set screw into the plastic spring holder, and then you pop the spring on. You keep everything square using a box wrench of sorts, okay? All right, now, the set screws are installed into the top plate. Now, the manual, I read it, I'm really taking my time with this kit. I want to make no mistakes. I don't want to have to take something apart after the fact and correct it, so I'm really taking my time, and I had a hard time figuring this out. Part B says the tweak spring assembly self-taps into the graphite cross plate from below. What does that mean? The tweak spring assembly. Okay, so remember, the tweak spring assembly is that set screw and that plastic spring holder. And it self-taps, meaning there's no threads in the graphite cross plate. You're going to cut threads by screwing the set screw into it, but from the bottom. So, with the 32-113 plate, that is the top plate, graphite cross plate rather, parallel to a table, center the set screw in the corresponding hole of the 32-113 graphite cross plate, line it up and apply a little pressure, then take a 0.50 Allen wrench, and by turning counterclockwise, this will draw the set screw up into the carbon by self-threading into the carbon. Okay, so what you have to do is you put your tweak assemblies on the table. You lay the carbon cross plate on top of them so that the set screws are just kind of below, right? So down on the table like this, and then you take your Allen wrench, you put it into the set screw like so, and you turn it counterclockwise while holding pressure down on top of those set screws. You got to hold even pressure. It compresses the springs. Gets pressure, creates pressure on the top of the set screw, keeps them centered in the hole, and then you slowly self-tap it, cut threads into the carbon fiber by going counterclockwise. By turning counterclockwise, it sucks that set screw up into the carbon fiber. It's a step that was not clear to me, but again, I said before I started this, I'm simple. I need you to talk slow and use beautiful colored crayons and draw pictures like I'm 5. So, there's nothing wrong with that, the way that's written. It was just me, and I had to read it several times to figure it out. I didn't know what they were talking about on the table and a little pressure, but yeah. You take those tweak spring assemblies, you put them on the table, you lay this piece of carbon plate on top, lining up the holes that the set screws are going to be into, keep some even pressure, a couple of fingers, and just slowly counterclockwise with your Allen wrench, a little bit on one side, go from one screw to the other screw, back and forth, and it pulls them up. You do the final adjustment once the assembly is done. So, yeah, very cool. Really impressed so far with everything, but that needed a little bit of extra attention, so I thought it would be worth mentioning. All right, we're on to bag F, and we're building the CRC Pro strut front end, and I want to show you what the front end assembly is going to be like if you don't call it intervene, okay? And then I'll show you the tools I'm using to rectify this situation, and I'll come back and show you the situation rectified. So what is the situation? Extreme binding in the top arm, okay? So you've got your bottom arm and your top arm. And the top arm is assembled with, you have the dynamic caster block. The kit comes with 3. There's 0 degrees, 5 degrees, and 10 degrees. The kit setup calls for the 5 degree. Then you have a cap on top that is held on with 4 screws. Now that's actually going to clamp down on the hinge pin. So where's my hinge pin? So you have a hinge pin that goes through the top arm and through the caster block, and that's actually pinned in place with that cap and those 4 screws. You don't want to over tighten them, but you want to snug them up and make sure that any gap underneath the screws is the same on all 4 corners. And the gap is not under the screws, the gap is between the caster block and the cap. Then you have your caster shims. The kit set up as 2 in the back and 1 in the front. Okay, so if you just build this thing and don't do any work to free up these parts, here's what you're going to get. See how that arm stays up in the air? Okay, so the first thing that you've got to do is remove any flashing from the arm in the front and the back and on the inside as well. Then when the pin goes into the arm, the arm should be free to move on the pin. Remember, the pin's going to be clamped, so clamp the pin in your finger and your thumb and flip the arm up and down, and the arm should move freely without any binding. Now, you don't want to make that pin goes in sloppy, but you need to free it up. So you take a drill bit, and this particular drill bit is a 5/64. So it fits into the arm very, very freely, but just turn it in and out, push it in and out while rotating it between your finger and your thumb, and every once in a while it'll catch a burr in there and it'll cut that burr out. Don't go crazy. You don't want to create slop, but you do want to free that up. That's the first thing you're going to do to free up these parts. And there you have it. That's step 1. Get the arm to move freely on the pin. Step 2. You're going to have binding, because the tolerances between the arm, the caster shim, the cap, caster shim, and arm, there's flashing there in the plastic when it comes out of the mold. You need to get rid of all that. Now here's how I do that. It says right in the manual if the fit of the upper arm is tight, trim the upper arm mount slightly with a hobby knife. Well, I don't trust myself with a hobby knife. I'll end up removing too much material. So I have here a Great Plains sanding bar for my airplanes. It has, this is like 320. This is 320 grit sandpaper glued to that. So it's true flat sanding bar. And I have also a piece of ceramic tile. And I'll just lay the arm flat on that because that's a flat surface. And I'll sand on the inside here, just ever so slightly. When you do that, you're going to create a little bit of a burr. So I'm going to run my drill bit through there again. So remove the flashing with a sanding tool and a light grit, so that you're taking off a little bit at a time with the light grit. Well, light sanding, so light pressure, even pressure. But also you want like a 320, 400, so that you're taking off a little bit at a time, but you're also kind of polishing it. You're not putting in big, deep gouges. If you went at this with 180 grit sandpaper, even 220, you'd be putting in some pretty deep scratches. After that, then I've even got 400 grit to really just one more just little light pass to get rid of any gouges in the plastic. Okay. The block assembly here, so you've got your caster block and then your arm cap. Did the same thing. There's flashings and moldings on these parts as well, so I just rub them gently, gentle pressure with the sanding block to eliminate any high spots in the plastic caused by flashings from the molding process. Okay, be patient, take your time, take off a little bit, assemble it, check the movement. If it's still binding, go back at it until everything moves nice and free without any extra slop. On to the next step. Okay, before moving on to the next step for bag, I don't know if I'm still on bag F or not, I want to show you the difference. I showed you how to obtain free movement in these parts, but I want to show you what it actually looks like once it's done. So here are the parts assembled without removing any flashing, any burrs whatsoever. You lift up the arm and it stays no matter where. It is completely binding. This will cause handling issues in your car. And this is the part where I have done some light sanding and deburring of the parts. Completely free without any added slop whatsoever. So I've got a little bit of front and back play. I hope I didn't take off too much. And this one there is 0 front and back play, but completely binding. So this one does have a little bit of play front and back. Maybe I got overzealous on the sanding. Maybe I didn't check often enough. So I will certainly take more time when I free up this one and check more often to make sure I don't create again any slop, right? These are precision machines and you don't want to, you want things to move freely, but you don't want any slop. So I'll definitely be a bit more careful on this one while I sand the parts. Okay, I'm proceeding through bag F, and I just feel that it's worth mentioning that bag F is not as organized as the rest of the bags. The rest of the manual is, you know, step 1, bag 1. When all the parts in bag 1 are gone, then you're on to step 2. The parts you need for step 1 are in bag 1, the hardware you need for step 1 are in bag 1, etc., right? Not bag F. All the bags are numbered, and bag F is bag F. And bag F has multiple bags inside. So you're working your way through bag F, and bag F is alright. So bag F has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 sections to bag F. So like it would help if these bags were labeled F1, F2, F3, something. Anyway, because like this bag is open, but it appears I'm done with this bag for now. Because looking at the manual is really good at using 1-to-1 scale for the hardware and the parts. So at the top of the page, it tells you the hardware you're going to need for the next step, which is awesome. But I'm not done with this bag, and now I've got to open up this bag to do this step. So it can be a little confusing. Just again, I just got to take my time and be careful, and make sure that, well, there you go. There's an E-clip required. No, okay. Oh, I'm noticing that they give extra hardware. For the shock, you need 2 E-clips. They give you 3. Caster shims, you need, they throw in some extra ones of those as well. I mean, I flung one across the room. Luckily, I found it, but if not, there was a spare. So, one other thing I want to comment on, and again, this is the me problem, because I don't have one and I don't know much about them, but I know that early days of 3D printing, everything was just awful. Quality and durability of 3D printed parts. I just never was impressed with 3D printing stuff. It just seems like something to make a little widget. Anything that's going to require any kind of durability, strength, precision, 3D is not there. However, I know it is getting better. Still not for me. That being said, this car came with some 3D printed parts. So they're not in a place where they're critical, but yeah, 3D printed parts in a kit, that's new to me. So anyway, right now we're continuing to do the Pro Strut front end and about to do the axles and the kingpin assembly for the steering. It's a pillow ball car. That's kind of cool. My associated 8 scale cars are pillow ball. I had no idea that the front end design of a pan car had gotten to the stage where they were using pillow balls, and I think that's really cool. So let's get that together, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. Okay, so carrying on with the Pro Strut front end, this is really cool and really impressive pillow ball 12 scale pan car. In the manual, when you get to the part where I can't tell you this is, well, I can tell you it's on page 7, and it's when you're inserting the pillow balls. So you gotta read the manual. If you just look at this and you go, oh, this end cap goes into the steering block against the pillow ball, and you just put it in straight and snug it up and then back it off so it doesn't play, you're going to be doing it wrong. You have to read the manual, because it says very clearly that this, they're calling it the slotted capture insert. So that's this right here. It doesn't go in horizontal. It goes in down and to the left. So pay attention to what you're doing, pay attention to what you're reading. And when you look at this part where it goes into, you'll see that it's actually tapered. Tapered's not the right word, but it is certainly angled. And when you peek inside, you can see that the threads do in fact go down. It's threaded at a downward angle towards the chassis. So assuming that it's soft plastic, I made sure that I used a properly fitted screwdriver. It's exactly the right width for the gap in that slot. It fits absolutely perfectly, so that I will not slip and damage that soft plastic. Insert it at a downward angle, and it just goes right in like butter. There's no binding, there's no cross threading, nothing. Now, the next part, tighten this capture insert so that the steering movement is bound and slow. You got it. Yes, we are actually slightly over tightening this piece for now, with the steering movement bound from over tightening. Move the steering to its limits back and forth. So we are doing this, what we are doing is breaking in the upper ball captured insert. After a minute or so of break-in, loosen the part just enough so that steering is free. Not too much so you don't induce excessive play. So that's really cool. Obviously this part has got to be tight. So they've kind of stacked the tolerance here and made it so it's too tight. So they actually want you to over tighten it, break it in a little bit, and then when you back it off, it's still going to be in there enough that it won't come out. Very cool. Amazing design. Oh, one other thing. One part of the manual, it tells you to put this kingpin into the block. You go through the pivot ball with the spring and the E-clip on, and then this is got a slot in it for the 0.50 Allen key. So you put the spring on, you put the E-clip on, you put the spring on, you come up through the pivot ball, and then you rotate your Allen key just until the spring touches the bottom of the pivot ball. It says not to preload the spring, but also not to have any play in there. But just before that, it shows the kingpin inserted without the spring on it, and it gives you a measurement from the E-clip to the steering block. Now, to me, a measurement is precise. Asking yourself whether or not you've preloaded that spring, whether or not there's play, I'm much more comfortable using my digital calipers and getting that gap precisely 10.2 millimeters. So that's what I did, and I assembled it that way. And there was no preload and no slop. So you got two choices, I guess. I certainly prefer to use the calipers on this part. All right, so that really works. So after I actually set a timer, and for 2 minutes with the insert tight against the ball, I did this for 2 minutes, back and forth, back and forth. Then I ever so slightly took pressure off of that insert until this would fall completely free. A little bit of binding there. Let's check this side. There we go. And I mean tiny increments on this little insert. Almost imperceivable. Just enough to get that steering block to move completely free, and there is no play whatsoever. So the part is completely broken in. Everything moves totally free, but zero play in that pillow ball. So let me show you what I did. So as I said, it said after a minute or so of break-in, well, I'm too OCD for or so, so I set a timer for 2 minutes, moved it back and forth, and then just ever so slightly, I don't even know if the camera will pick up. Look at the label here, how little I'm going to move this at a time. Okay, still too tight. Still too tight. Getting there. Oh, we're so close. Is this overkill? Maybe, but it's not making the cart any worse to be this careful. There we go. Look at that. Just a smidgen more. Too much. No play, but I feel like I can tighten it back up a little bit. This one doesn't feel as good as the other one. By that I mean, the other one, as I was backing off, it still felt like it was tight in there. This one almost feels like it's going to come right out. You know what? I'm almost tempted to give this one some more break-in time because, yeah, it's finger tight now, where the other one is not finger tight. Interesting. Yeah, I'm going to tighten it back up again and break it in a bit more. I feel like I've just had to back that out too much to get it to free up on the ball. So I'm going to try breaking it in for a few more minutes. Yeah, but you definitely get the idea, and it's a pretty cool system. Another pro tip to get a straight car. While attaching the front end to the chassis, I noticed that the 3mm, this is the 3D printed part, it wasn't sitting flush and flat against the chassis. It looked like there was some, light passing through there. I had tightened the these two 8/32 Phillips screws. I tightened them down, but it still wasn't completely flush and flat against the chassis. So I removed it and had a look. And what I did was I took the straight edge and I laid it against that 3D printed part, and I tried to slide it across the part like that. And sure enough, it was catching on the screws. So the screws were sticking out. You see those silver screws there? They were sticking out proud of this 3D printed part. So I very slowly, gently, in an effort to not strip them out, continued to add pressure to get them sucked into that 3D printed part until my straight edge here could pass over top of them without catching. And then I did it to this one as well, and sure enough, these are the little details that you want to take your time and pay attention to have a car that's built straight, true, and not tweaked. That one was still a little proud. Oops. Now the back one is a little bit. Now the front one. I want that straight edge to pass over those screws without any catching or binding whatsoever, and then I know they're going to lay flat on the carbon fiber chassis. Oh, that front one is still a little bit. Haha. Perfect. Now it's time to install them. Alright, so I am attempting to build the differential. Now here's the thing. This is where the manual really fell down. Bag 8, rear axle. Just shows the axle and a couple of shims, flange bearing, hubs, 0 instructions. Just a picture of the axle, the hub, some spacers, no indication what you're supposed to do with that. Then below that is solid axle. So bag 8 is rear axle, bag 9 is solid axle. So you can build it like with basically a slipper eliminator sort of thing, where the what would be your diff gear, your spur, is bolted directly to the axle. All right, that's fine, that's cool. Step 1, build the solid axle. Number 2, final assembly. But then on the next page, it's the differential. So I was recommended to build this with the differential. Now, look at those diff rings. They have one flat edge on the inside to act as a locator to make sure that it doesn't spin on the hub or the axle. And sure enough, and you'll never see this on camera, there is on the axle here, this edge is square, meant to receive that squared off line inside the diff ring. The hub, where your bearings and your thrust washer and all that go, same thing. It's got a square edge. No problem. Look at the diff rings they include. So I haven't got that figured out yet. And when it shows the assembly, plain bearing. All right, there's 2. That's the other thing. At the top where they show you what the hardware is, they don't tell you how many of each one there is. So I don't know, there's 2 plain bearings, and there's one across the top here. It doesn't even show the flanged bearing, but it does show it in the diagram that the flanged bearing goes inside the hub. So that's cool. Well, that's whatever. Good. That's done. Now, plain bearing is supposed to go inside this spur gear. It ain't happening. I don't know how to get that in there. What's going on with that? So to date, so far, this has definitely been the most frustrating part of the build, where at no point in the beginning does it say, hey, you know, you got options. You can build it with a straight axle or with a diff. The advantage, normally, one thing that this manual I've praised for while talking to some of my buddies is when it talks about a setup change, it actually goes the next step and tells you how this setup change will affect the car. More steering, less steering, roll center, and what those things do to the handling of the car, which is really great. I know a lot of manuals don't do that at all. A lot of hop-up parts that need to be assembled don't come with instructions at all. So, good on CRC for doing that, but this section, oy. So, oftentimes kits get upgraded. Later on in production, they make subtle changes. Sometimes they forget to put an addendum into the manual. And perhaps that's what's going on here. So, I'll see what's going on. I'll read more carefully. I'll reach out to some of my friends who own this car and see if I can't sort this out. Again, maybe for you this is simple, but I'm simple. So for me, it's not simple. All right, so one part of this assembly has been sorted out. And as I said, oftentimes kits are changed along the way in production. They forgot to make mention of it, but really, you know, again, if you're patient, you take your time, you don't force things, things line up. So sure enough, the diff ring does fit on this hub. They've cut a slot in the corner of these flanges here. I'm calling them flanges, but these two that I'm touching with the X-Acto knife, here we go, that's a better view. Here and here, they've cut corners in them to line up with how that's been squared off. See if I can get that. So at the top here, you'll see it's squared off in the corners. Well, they've cut the diff ring to align there on those two corners. So it's working quite well. The manual says, you know, put the ring on, put the bearing on. And then the manual says, align the diff ring so that it notches into the axle flange. Place the assembled gear with the greased balls over the axle and push down over the plain bearing. And then the diff ring comes off. It does not want to go down over that bearing, man. Like, she is a very, very tight fit. I wonder if it is unidirectional. I wonder if maybe one side goes on easier than the other. It is possible. And once you know how to put that diff gear on, or that diff ring, it drops into place perfectly every time. Doesn't want to stay there, mind you, but anyway, the struggle is real to continue to get the spur gear to slide over that plain bearing. I'm going to fight with that for a while and get back to you. Ta-da! I tried my patience, but everything is fine. And getting the bearing lined up in the other hub was easier, of course, when you put it on the axle and then applied even pressure on the hub. And then it's tight fit, man. Tolerances are pretty tight, but in the end, definitely having the bearing on the axle helped it go on the hub much easier. So next, the flange bearing, and then 4732 isn't even on this page. It's on the other page, and that is the 1/4 inch shims, and it wants 2 of them, which, by the way, they were loose in the box. Some of the 3 of these shims and the button head bolts for this part of the assembly were just sitting loose in the box. Okay, so those 2 shims are on there. And now the diff spacer, the bearing, the shims, and then it's calling for a spacer, a lip spacer, but it's not weird. 4121. Yeah, the instructions just are not clear. At the top of the page here, 4121, it's a diff spacer with a lip. Next, slide the flange bearing over the axle into the front of the diff hub. Place 2 of the shims over the axle. Continued. Continued where? Nowhere. Literally says CONT as in continued, like continued on the next page or something. It's not. And there's a spring washer And it doesn't talk about the spring washer. But the part number's there. It doesn't tell you which way the cone should go. Experience tells me that the cone should be towards the nut. And then there's a nylon diff nut. Seems weird that those two shims go in between the diff spacer. It's doing diff things. Once the tires are on, it's okay. Bumper and body mounts. Oh, apparently now that the diff is built, I'm supposed to go back to the previous page and put it into the car, I guess. Wow. So you go back to bag 8 once you've decided if you're doing bag 9 solid axle or if you're doing bag 9 differential. Once that's built, then you go back to bag 8 to see where the spacers are supposed to go. So 4720 4732 and 1386. What is the flange? Okay, the flange bearing is in. On the diagram, it doesn't show the part number for the axle spacer. It shows a part number for everything else. It shows, well, the actual 4732 is pointing at the axle spacer, but 4732 is a shim. The diagram shows the axle spacer and a shim. What a mess. It's calling the axle spacer in the diagram the shim. The diagram clearly shows a thicker, wider axle spacer than a shim. So that's going to go in like that. Silky smooth. On the other side, the bearing. 2 shims. Hey, and that's all I've got left, so that's working out well. And then, what's this madness? Wow, man, look at that. I have another bag with another hub, another wider spacer, more shims, more bolts. What? What is up with that? What's going on? Why do I have... Alright, let me keep... And it's weird. Look at this. The other hub is in this bag all by itself. First glance, it looks to be the same. And then three button head screws, and there are 3 holes to attach a wheel to the hub. 2 1/4-inch shims and 2 socket head screws, which clamp the hub onto the axle. What's up? What's up? What's going on? Some of this has to do with whether or not you build the solid axle or if you build... Right, of course, you're not going to use this hub with the bearings and the cone washer if you're not using a diff. if you're doing the solid axle, bag 9, sure enough, yeah, bag 9 shows this other hub. So that's, wow, man, it shouldn't be this complicated, but here we are. Yeah, and the 5mm spacer. Okay, so these parts, this 5mm spacer, this hub, that's if you're doing the solid axle. Okay, all right, see, I got it eventually, man. It just, you know, talk slow, use crayons. Wow, wow, this could have been like bagged more appropriately, unless I'm doing it wrong, and I'm willing to admit that maybe I am. But I think, you know, bag 8 rear axle, and it's got some stuff. Bag 9 solid axle, but bag 9 also includes the diff stuff. So why not go bag 9 solid axle, bag 10 diff stuff? And I wouldn't have been confused by this 5mm axle spacer and this extra hub. Anyway, it's good now. It's good now. I'm all right. I'm okay. I'm all right. God, this is hard. So a minute ago I was ranting about step 2 diff assembly, and it got to the bottom where it said continued, and I couldn't see where it was continued. Well, you know, it's staring me right in the face. Diff assembly continued. The diff spacer, all the things I was lamenting about, here they are. The diff spacer, part 4121, has a small machined lip on one side. Point the lip towards the bearing. Well, I could see that, at least I could see that in the diagram. And there's a little heads up in the diagram, small lip towards the bearing. Point that lip towards the bearing. Now, place the spring washer so that the cone points away from the gear. Well, I said that just from experience. I knew that, but I was complaining about it'd be nice if they told me how to do it. Well, here it is. It tells you how to do it. The outside of the washer should be against the diff spacer. The outside of the washer should be against the diff spacer. The inside of the washer should be against the diff nut. I've never heard them refer to as outside, inside like that. Tapered side, the cone side, which now goes on last. Be sure the 2 D-rings have settled into their notches. They have. Just snug the nut so the parts stay together on the diff axle. Do not over tighten so that the outer diff hub bearing gets crushed. Correct the tension. The correct diff tension needs to be set with the tires on the car. Fair enough. Setting the diff once the tires are on, adjust the, okay. I can worry about setting the diff later as long as I know that it's been assembled correctly. That cone washer though. Now place the spring washer so the cone points away from the gear. Okay, well that's done. The outside of the washer should be against the diff spacer. And the inside of the washer should be against the diff nut. Well, you know, I'll go back to where it says the cone points away from the gear, and it does, so I'm going to go with I've got it right. All right, on to the bumper body mounts. Now I've got to get the body mounted because I'm going to have it painted by someone, and it should be mounted before it's painted. I know some people mount them after, but not this guy. I like to have them mounted and then painted so that I don't have to go trying to line things up with paint on the shell. All right, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty now. We're at the point of installing body mounts, and they are to be installed using a 440 by 3/8 button head screw. It's number 1436, and the hole in the body mount is just way too tight. Way too tight. It has to be drilled out a little bit first, so you know, don't get crazy. Use a slightly you know, same size bit as your 3/8 screw, and open up the hole just a little bit, about halfway, just to get things going. And I mean, I'm doing it by hand. I'm not even using it in a drill. So, you know, get it started with a drill bit, make your life a lot easier. And then here's a little pro tip: Allen key through the hole where the body mount goes, or the not the body mount, the body clip, the pin. So if you don't want to mar it up with pliers while you're tightening it, you stick the same size Allen key through the hole in the body post that your body clip is going to go through, and that allows you to support the mount, gives you something to get some leverage on while you tighten the screw down with your hex driver. So again, the reason why I do this, the reason why I use this Allen key, is it helps. I can hold the Allen key straight, things are aligned, and I don't have to mar up the plastic with pliers and make it look all hobo. On to the back ones. And there we have it. The assembly of the kit is now complete. The only thing left for me to do is to install the electronics when they arrive, so that may end up being another video along the way. However, for now, the comprehensive build review of this car is complete, and I must say, no regrets. That's not true. I have one regret, and that is that I don't have another one of these to build. I'm seriously impressed. The fit, finish, quality of the parts, second to none. If I compare this kit to other kits that I built from other manufacturers, if I was going to rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, fit, finish, quality of materials used, 9 out of 10. And it's so affordable. This little car, in my opinion, now, my limited experience with paint cars, okay, however, in my opinion, it has no business being this good for the price point. It really is more than competitively priced if you consider that it's practically half the cost of its nearest competitors or its other competitors in the market. So given how affordable it is, the quality, the ease of assembly, I know I griped throughout the building process about what I was perceiving as pitfalls with the manual. At the end of the day, for the most part, the manual is fantastic. I would give the manual like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. Again, though, I'm taking responsibility. Full disclosure, I said at the beginning, not a smart man. So I struggled a little bit with the manual, but that's probably a me problem more than the manual. You may find the manual absolutely just perfect. So I wish it was available for download online. So, you know, because a lot of people do like to look at those manuals on a computer as opposed to on paper or ahead of time, let's say. They're a good reference to have. I always bring my laptop to the track, so rather than drag the paper manual with me if I want to verify something, part number, whatever, I like to have it on my computer. Also, there's a pretty extensive tuning guide in the manual, which is awesome. You know, props to CRC. Throughout the manual, many times they made mention of, hey, if you do this, this is how it affects the handling. And then at the end of the manual is an entire tuning guide. So that's awesome. So really, that's all I've got for now. I'm very impressed. Price point is amazing. Quality is second to none. And if you're looking to get into 12 scale pan car racing, I cannot recommend this one enough. I hope you found that video informative, maybe even entertaining. And if you did like it, great. Thanks for watching. And until next time, bye for now.